Hello, my name is Brendan Milton,
And I am Nolan Rickett.
and today we're going to talk about Socrates and what exactly happened in the final days before his death.
As some of you already know, Socrates was best described as a titan of philosophy. He was born and raised in Athens, a massive city of his era. He spent his entire life dedicated to the search of wisdom, that search being born from a divine calling that occurred while he was about 30 years old from the Oracle of Delphi and the conflicting feeling that he, in fact, knew nothing.
This search was executed using what Socrates is best at, the elenchus method. This consisted of Socrates methodically asking people a series of puzzling questions about the things they claimed to know about, typically having to do with morality and the nature of the world. Often, this method would reveal that its victims, those who claimed to have profound knowledge, did not know as much as they thought by exposing contradictions in their beliefs.
This method, well effected, landed Socrates many times in hot water with the powerful people of Athens, many of whom themselves had been humiliated by it. Eventually, this caught up to him, as he was placed on trial and, despite a passionate speech in his own defense, was sentenced to death for corruption of the youth and not acknowledging the gods that were mandated by the city of Athens.
Socrates was offered a way out of this, however.
In the middle of the night, while Socrates was in prison, a friend of his, Crito, approached him, offering to help him escape and smuggle him to Italy. Now, Brendan, how do we feel about this?
So, we both ultimately agree that Socrates was right to refuse Crito and remain in prison, as he had a moral obligation to do so. This is because he had implicitly agreed to a sort of social contract, and to break out of jail would be a direct violation of this. In doing this, as Socrates agreed, he would be committing a highly immoral act, harming his soul, a far worse fate than any harm his body might receive upon his execution.
You mentioned a social contract. Now, what exactly is this social contract?
I am so glad you asked. The social contract theory is something that we can see in the discussion between our main man of the hour and his friend Crito. In this work, as well as other works of the era, we can see the foundational principle of political philosophy peer through. This principle is that a man and a city, or any governing body, are bound by a metaphysical contract that, if violated, revokes the benefits and rights that a man has within their city, or a city has with regards to that man.
So, let me get this straight. Socrates was bound by Athens to follow their laws in exchange for the benefits and opportunity one has within that city. But Athens had to respect his individual rights and give him this fair and impartial trial.
That is correct. But still, some may ask, why didn't Athenian society break their end of the contract by sentencing an innocent man to death? Why should Socrates still have to obey the society that unjustly decided to kill him?
I think I can take a crack at this, from what I understand. Socrates was a man who did things that were best described as being a modern-day troll. However, he did not inherently violate any parts of the social contract that revoked his right to a trial with his peers. At the same time, the Athenian jurors had the right to vote in any way they saw fit at Socrates' trial, as long as they were not being bribed or threatened, which there is no evidence of. This trial was a democratic vote, and it was agreed upon by most voters in Athens that he deserved the death penalty. Well, yes, the trial can be borne on grounds of personal offense. It was still executed and brought together through a just means of information and allowed Socrates the privilege to defend himself in an unbiased court of law.
Yes, I do see that now.
Therefore, the trial, and by extent Socrates' death sentence, can be seen as something that was inherently within the bounds of Athens' social contract.
But he was friends with the 30 tyrants. Couldn't his trial have been politically motivated and not fair?
A very fair question to ask. However, there is nothing in the annals of history that can point towards this being more of a metaphorical lynching than a trial that was decided upon his peers and the city of Athens. Therefore, there is no concrete justification that points to Athens violating their end of the social contract theory. While there was no violation, the trial and what Socrates did with it seems questionable. I don't know about you, but personally, I think my body is more valuable than my pride and my desire to remain just in the face of death.
Well, that is not at all what Socrates thought, and we know this.
Are you crazy? He had the chance to leave, and he just sat there and took it and died?
Yep. In his discussion with Crito, we see that there is something that is exactly like what you are talking about, and rather than flee to preserve the flesh, he stays, as he views the injuries that his soul would sustain far outweigh the benefit his body would receive, saying, "And will life be worth living, if that higher part of man be depraved, which is improved by justice and deteriorated by injustice? Do we suppose that principle, whatever it may be in man, which has to do with justice and injustice, is inferior to the body?"
After hearing that, I can see the value of keeping the soul safe, even though it is harming the body.
All right, let's get back to the point.
Yeah. Basically, Socrates was a man whose wisdom was his brightest feature. His ability to argue and think critically were unparalleled in his time. However, this power was seen as an affront to many men of the time who carried themselves as if they were the wisest. However, when Socrates was interested in proving this wisdom, he dismantled what they knew and left them rightfully furious. This notion of coy wisdom proved to be his undoing, as he was considered a corrupter of the youth and died on those principles, which he is now so famous for.
Because it would be immoral for him to escape as a violation of the social contract, and due to our opinion that morality is more important than life itself, we believe that it was for the best that Socrates remained in his cell and faced death head on.
That's everything that we have to say today. Brendan, would you like to send them home?
Thank you all for listening. Hopefully you learned about Socrates, his story, and why it is always good not to piss off politicians. Have a wonderful day.